So the theme of this year's symposium is leadership and innovation in nursing. And there's no better way to kick off our evening than with Geraldine Murray's presentation on one of Ireland's most important and revered nurse leaders, Peta Taaffe. Geraldine has a long history of nursing leadership throughout Ireland. She's held senior positions in large acute hospitals in Ireland and the Middle East, and she's currently the Director of Nursing for Galway University Hospitals in the west of Ireland. And not insignificantly, she lives almost right around the corner from this hotel. And so I have to say that Geraldine has assisted us in the planning committee greatly over this past year. So please join me in welcoming Geraldine Murray, who's going to speak on the impact of the life and legacy of Peta Taaffe on nursing in Ireland.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Galway. And a very special thank you from me and my Irish colleagues to Mary Jo and her planning team for taking this conference to Galway. I hope it will go down in memory. I can't emphasise enough, really, how delighted and honoured I am in being here with all my national and my international colleagues this afternoon to present the life story of Peta Taaffe at this integrative nursing symposium. This project actually commenced as far back as 2009, when a then work colleague, Margaret Pendergast, and I carried out a preliminary interview with Peta in Dublin. Since that preliminary interview over the last 2 years, Peta and I have worked intensively together to build upon and to deepen this work, with Peta giving very generously of her time for interviews in her house in Balbriggan in North County Dublin, and also through emails and phone correspondences. Today's presentation is a culmination of that work over the last while. In 2016, Peta was awarded an honorary doctorate from Trinity College Dublin, awards which are given to individuals of integrity, judgment and exceptional achievement. Peta Taaffe is indeed a woman of integrity, judgment and exceptional achievement. As the first chief nurse of this country, as a ministerial appointment to the Irish Commission on Nursing in 1997, and then to subsequently lead the implementation of many of the recommendations of that commission, few others within nursing in Ireland have had the level of impact on the profession that Peta has had to date. The purpose of this paper is to chart Peta's life story, and as part of this narrative of Peta's life, to map out the changes in Irish nursing that Peta has not just witnessed, but also pioneered, championed and implemented over the course of her long career. Over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, I have the great honour of telling the story of Peta's life, and this will be followed by a conversation between Peta and Dr. Siobhan O'Halloran, the current Chief Nurse of Ireland. So firstly, I would like to share with you a little bit about Peta, who she was, where she came from, and so that you'll know a little bit about her before I start into all the work that she's done. And also I'll include in that how she actually spent her early years. Peta was born in Kenya in 1938. She's the daughter of Rudolph Trevor Aloysius Taaffe, 1902 to 1985, from County Louth, and Dorothy Margaret Cruz Taaffe, 1903 to 1995, who actually came from England. Peta's father was in the Royal Air Force, RAF, and was stationed in Kenya at the time of Peta's birth. The family returned to England, which was in the midst of the war, when Peta was still quite young. Peta spent much of her early years living in a caravan on RAF stations. After a time, when Peta was aged 7 years, the family moved to Malta, where they lived for a couple of years. Peta loved Malta and its beautiful weather, where she spent most of her time swimming. The family then returned to England, where Peta attended boarding school from age 10, and where she completed her school years. The boarding school was in Assumption Convent in Suffolk, near Bury St Edmunds, and it was here that Peta completed her GCSE levels. Peta then started to embark on a nursing career in 1958. She initially undertook a secretarial course when she left school. However, it wasn't long before she came bored with the secretarial course and thought nursing might be an interesting career. Peta always had an interest in all things medical and nursing, and so applied to various London teaching hospitals. Our preference then was for the 3-year training course as opposed to the 4-year training, which included 1-year staffing, and which was the type of training the majority of London hospitals offered. However, there was one hospital, the London Hospital, now the Royal London Hospital, which provided 3-year training. Peta applied, was accepted, and commenced her nurse training at the end of 1958. Memories actually stand out for Peta on the first day on her ward. And in her own words, we were all assigned to a specific ward, and walking into this enormous ward, a sort of terror came over me, and yet an interest as well. I can still see it so clearly, and I can even remember my first patient that I ever really spoke to. His name was John. I will never forget him. It's funny how one remembers things like that. She went on to tell me, and I quote, "First exams were after first year, and I had to put on a crepe bandage for my exam, right around somebody's head, which is extraordinarily difficult. When the examiners took it off, it had to stay intact in one piece, like a little hat. Otherwise, it could constitute a fail." After qualifying as a general nurse in 1961, Peta and a friend from our group decided to do midwifery. They chose to do this in Scotland for part of the training, and also she had never actually been to Scotland before. Back then, midwifery consisted of 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. According to Peta, the first delivery that I attended was with a district midwife. It was undiagnosed twins, and it was in a little what they used to call a single end. This was a little house, a 1-storey house, with no indoor lavatory, and we gave the poor woman an enema, sat her on a bucket, and then carried the bucket down the street around the corner to a drain to empty it. Many of the deliveries were in tenements in those days. They had very little furniture, and so you had to set up the delivery on top of a television set, sometimes, if they were lucky enough to have one. Sometimes you had the father lying on the bed beside you whilst you were delivering. That was a tremendous experience. Doing district midwifery in the 1960s in the Gorbals in Glasgow. Another event that came to mind during our discussions, where the woman had a postpartum hemorrhage and had to be lowered out of the window on a makeshift stretcher because we couldn't get her down the stairs, which was so narrow. Peta then returned to Ireland in 1963 and started working as a midwife in the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin. And she was telling me many, many stories about the Rotunda Hospital, and one of them that stands out specifically was that they used an item called tow, T-O-W, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it was a sort of brown stuff. It was like steel wool, really, and a byproduct of, I think, coconut matting or something. It's terribly harsh stuff, but very cheap, and they used to have these bowls of Dettol disinfectant and water, and this tow in it for swabbing down women before they declared it was the most vicious stuff. It was horrible. You wouldn't want to wash your face with it. I remember one other day, I was in charge of the private labour ward, and this woman was having a bit of a hard time when the matron arrived, and there was only one other nurse on duty with me, a student midwife, who matron had actually sent off the ward. I didn't know matron had sent her off the ward, and when she reappeared, I asked her where she had been, as the ward was frightfully busy, and I needed her. She said matron had sent her down to get a relic from the antenatal ward for this woman who was having a difficult time. That was the first time I had come across that sort of thing. People who trained in Ireland said they met it all the time. And a relic, for those of you who don't know, is actually, it's a part of a diseased holy person's body or belonging, kept as an object of reverence, used, usually of historical interest, and usually given to people who are sick, the likes of Peel relic and all of these. The time then had come for Peta to go in search of an adventure. And off she went to Australia. She arrived in Melbourne after a 3-week trip across from Southampton to Fremantle through the Suez Canal and then on to Melbourne. One lasting memory of the trip at that time was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I bought a beat-up Volvo, in Peta's words, a beat-up Volkswagen Beetle, and we set out driving up the coast. We went through Sydney, stopped there and met up with some people we had met on the boat. Then we drove up to North Queensland, calling into various hospitals until we got a job, stopped in a place called Porcupine, and there was a general and midwifery hospital there. Working in Australia was indeed a valuable experience for Peta. It opened my eyes, according to Peta, as to what nurses can actually do in different situations to provide and improve the delivery and outcome of care in both planned and emergency situations. Peta then moved to New Zealand, spending 5 months in New Zealand, choosing not to do nursing on this occasion, but opting instead to hitchhike around both islands, working in apple orchards, staying in youth hostels, and ending up in Wellington with the British High Commissioner, who was an old family friend. Peta then decided to return to the UK and to Ireland in 1967. In the late 1960s, Peta went to Paddington in London and worked in St Mary's, 1 year as a theatre nurse and 1 year as a theatre sister. It was 1968, and we were one of the first hospitals to do kidney transplants in England. I remember one of the junior doctors would be the person to go and collect the donor kidney. He went over to St George's in Hyde Park Corner one day, and he was trying to get across Hyde Park with the kidney and thermos flask when he got mixed up in a demonstration. So in the end, the police had to put him in a Black Maria and drove him back to the hospital with the kidney and the thermos flask. And that was all very interesting. Peta's first job as matron was in the College Hospital in Galway, which is about 45 minutes outside of Dublin, in 1970. Back in those days, matrons of such hospitals had many more responsibilities than just nursing. They were responsible for all other operational aspects of care to staff and patients. Peta also worked clinically whenever it was needed, especially in theatre and in maternity. Nursing in the 70s was quite different to what it is today, fortunately. There were no pharmacists, so I did all the pharmacy, according to Peta, and all the ordering. Where there was a problem with the water, I climbed the ladder and checked the water tank. I supervised the gardeners. And this was an era when absolutely nothing was wasted. We had pigs also who ate the swill. One day one of the pigs got ill and we couldn't get a vet, so I asked one of the doctors to go down and have a look at the pig. Another day, a pig escaped. And there's a marvellous photograph of one of the staff nurses chasing the pig down the garden. Unfortunately, neither Peta or I could get our hands on that. Peta then moved to Dublin in 1976, and this was the start of a dreadful time of hospital closures and amalgamations, mostly in Dublin. She assumed the title of matron of Mercy's Hospital, which was a pretty nice little hospital with about 90 beds. It was rather small in comparison to some of those today. It was a training school, and we did surgery, medicine. It had a small intensive care unit and some outpatients, but it was a happy time working in that little hospital. It subsequently closed as an acute facility in 1983. This was actually one of the first hospitals to close as part of the amalgamations in Dublin that took place during that decade, a decade when many, many changes were about to come. Mercy's Hospital was subsequently converted into a medical centre in the 1990s and is now part of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. Managing change. Staffing consisted of one assistant matron and ward sisters, some of who had been there for their entire lives. I'm talking about nurses. When the hospital closed as an acute facility in 1983, it was a terrible kind of bereavement for those ward sisters, and they had been there for so long. It was their home. They lived there and they didn't have any other accommodation. So I had to sort out their accommodation. There was also domestic staff who had come from the Magdalen laundries as teenagers. This was their home. I did manage to find various places for them all, but it was all very traumatic. And probably a lot of you in this room do not know or may not have heard of the Magdalen laundries, but they were known as Magdalen asylums in Ireland and were usually run by Roman Catholic orders, which operated from the 18th to the late 20th century, and where unmarried women who became pregnant or were deemed to be too promiscuous were placed in these facilities run by nuns. The Magdalen laundries is a very, very powerful story, recently coming to the fore with what could be considered a somewhat breakdown of the once powerful Catholic Church in Ireland. and the Catholic Church was very, very powerful at that time. That is a picture of Nurses Hospital as it is today and part of the Royal College of Surgeons. Peter then moved to the Royal City of Dublin Hospital, and I guess this is where I first met Peter in the early 80s when I went to work there as a staff nurse. Peter took up the post of matron in 1983, commonly known as Baggot Street Hospital. The Royal City of Dublin, or Baggot Street, was a much bigger and busier hospital which specialised in cardiothoracic surgery and coronary care. It also provided for medicine, surgery, gynecology, and had a very good and busy intensive care unit. However, it was only a matter of time before the Royal City of Dublin Hospital would be closed as an acute hospital and amalgamated into one of the bigger federated voluntary Dublin hospitals. So, according to Peta, eventually Baggot Street was given the chop as well. It wasn't actually closed down, it was given over to the Health Board as a community hospital. So it was a question for me then to oversee all the acute patients move out. Some of them remained, but a lot of them went out also at this time. Some went to St. Patrick Dunn's Hospital, which was another local hospital, but the majority went to St. James's. And all the student nurses, because Baggot Street was a training hospital, went to St. James's. Baggot Street closed then as an acute facility and became a community hospital, under the auspices of the newly formed Health Board. And health boards were a type of healthcare system at that time in Ireland, which were created by the 1970 Health Act. This was Peter's first experience working in health board hospitals, and I suppose coming from the hospitals she did, she found that quite different because they were run differently, they were managed differently to many extent. So according to Peter's words, I just didn't realise how controlling the health boards actually were. Once I wanted some fire guards, as we had gas fires in the ward, and you couldn't leave the old people sitting by the fire because they would say things like, throw a log at the fire dear. So you had to put a fire guard around it. I couldn't get fire guards from the health board, so I went to Rocha Stores, which was a prominent department store in downtown Dublin. So I could buy some fire guards. And when I bought the fire guards, I said, could you please send the bill to the health board? And they said, absolutely no way, because they never pay, it takes months, and it could take years. So I had to pay for the fire guards in the end myself, and I sent the bill to the health board. Of course, they were furious, but I hammered on at them, and eventually I got my money. And these little stories tells the type of person Peta actually is, which I will allude to at the end. Another time when I needed some staff, because some of the temporary staff had left, so I told them I needed to advertise, which is what I had always done. And they said, oh no, you can't advertise because we have an embargo on here. So I said, oh, blow that, and I advertised for the box number, and I got my staff. I advertised, Southside Dublin needs temporary staff, and I got what I needed. People say no, but you just go and do it. It's really much better. It's much better to not ask permission, but it's much easier to ask forgiveness afterwards. Peter then became matron of St. James's in 1985 and was there for actually 11 years. It's now the biggest academic teaching hospital in Ireland with about 1,000 beds and 4,000 staff. But I always like to say not all the big hospitals are in Dublin, because Galway University Hospitals, where a lot of us work here locally, has got the biggest OPD throughput and the biggest ED throughput. So there you go, St. James's. Peta, in her own words, said, in St. James's, I mean in a bigger hospital, it was way easier to manage. You have more people to call on. People used to say to me, it's such a huge responsibility managing a big hospital. But I said, no, it isn't. It's far less of a responsibility because there is somebody there to worry about the maintenance. There is somebody to employ the cooks. There is somebody to decide who to give the bread contract to. There is somebody to decide when the time is right to paint the wards. And all those things that you were responsible for in a smaller hospital as matron. In St. James's, I just had to worry about nursing, the allied health staff, and of course the student nursing, which was also part of the hospital back then. So the changing landscape of nursing in Ireland started around the late 80s, early 90s, and throughout into the early 2000s. Peta was one of those fantastic change agents during that time here in Ireland. And it was during Peta's time at St. James's that nursing began its major transition in Ireland, changing from an apprenticeship model of training to a tertiary level diploma. Many of these changes were led by Peta as matron of St. James's, She established the first combined intensive care coronary care postgraduate course during her time there. On board alternate, or the Irish Nursing Board, as it's known now, refused to let us run this course, according to Peta, but again, she ran it anyway. But for forgiveness afterwards, and within a short time afterwards, they recognised it and approved it. A number of other post-registration courses were initiated around that time also. The first nurse from St James's was supported to undertake her PhD during Peta's tenure. Peta also advocated for a definite career path for nurses who wished to remain in clinical nursing practice, as at that time nurses who wanted to progress in their careers had to do so through management or teaching positions. Great if you wanted to do management and if you wanted to teach, but if you wanted to remain clinical, there was little for them. Peta had many priorities, and she always saw research, training and specialisation as priorities during her own career. St James's, with Peta at the helm, was one of those hospitals which promoted and facilitated the first nurse to practice at an advanced level, and who was subsequently appointed to the emergency department on a pilot basis. This was the beginning of the advanced nurse practitioner role. That advanced nurse practitioner was Valerie Small, if I'm correct, and I think she recently retired. In 1996, the tender for the establishment and provision of cardiac surgery services at St James's Hospital was issued. It contained a proposal to include 4 advanced nurse practitioners as part of the staffing complement. And 4 might sound very little to a lot of you who come from big countries with big hospitals. Ireland is a small little island with a population of probably 4,000 and 4 million, I'm sorry. And, you know, 4 advanced nurse practitioners back then for one hospital was a lot. The pilot was successful, and the role was eventually approved by the National Council in 2001 and accredited by St James's Hospital in 2002. We'll move on then to the Chief Nurse of Ireland and the Commission on Nursing, 1997 to 1998. In 1997, Peta was offered the post of Chief Nurse of Ireland, which was the first Chief Nurse of Ireland, effectively. This was a ministerial appointment by the then Minister for Health, Michael Noonan, who wanted to see an integrated and strengthened nursing function within the Department of Health. One of Peta's main responsibilities was policy making and planning. She advised the Minister for Health via the Secretary General in the Department of Health on all nursing matters. As head of the Nursing Policy Unit in the Department of Health, she was responsible for representing Irish nurses nationally and internationally, and for ensuring that Irish nursing policy facilitated healthcare developments and the needs of the population. Peta was then appointed by the Minister for Health to the Irish Commission on Nursing in 1997-98, chaired by the late Justice Mela Carl. In Peta's own words, the big change happened after the Commission on Nursing. This was what led to some huge changes in nursing and in nursing education. Prior to this, student nurses in their second year were left in charge of wards at night time in England and in Ireland. And these wards were about 30, in excess of 30 beds. This was an enormous responsibility for a student. Yet, there was a night sister, but she couldn't possibly be everywhere. It really needed a change. There was no doubt about it. Also, giving patients breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning was absolutely outrageous and nonsense when you were ill. So Peta wasn't long before she started to change that, and each hospital she worked in, she made sure patients were fed when they woke up, and not at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that has permeated right through to today. A blueprint for the future of Irish nursing. Well, through the Commission on Nursing, a blueprint for the future of Irish nursing was initiated. And a quote from the executive summary stated that nursing and midwifery are cornerstones of the modern Irish health service. The quality of care and public satisfaction with the health service is often related to the quality of the nursing service. Irish nurses not only enjoy the confidence of patients and clients, but have an international reputation for their professionalism and their excellence of care. However, the health services are in a state of constant and rapid development. The Commission is recommending a new framework which will give a secure basis for the further professional development of nursing and midwifery in the context of anticipated changes in the health service. And that was part of the executive summary. The Commission on Nursing, with the report, represented the most comprehensive review on nursing and midwifery ever conducted in Ireland. Out of a total of 200 recommendations, there were 2 that totally transformed nursing in Ireland. The introduction of a pre-registration degree programme for nurses and midwives, which replaced the certificate and the diploma programmes as the qualifying programme for registering as a nurse. And also the development of a clinical career pathway leading from generalist nurse to specialist nurse and then to advanced practice. The title of matron was also changed. The Commission recommended that in future all matrons in large acute hospitals would and should have the title Director of Nursing. So around this time, and in Peta's own words again, she stated that she worked within the Department of Health at a good time. Things in Ireland were beginning to turn around a bit, and there was a little bit of money coming my way, so I was able to employ advisors, which was great. I had some marvellous people working with me, all of whom went on to do great things. One of those advisors, Dr. Siobhan O'Halloran, is now currently the Chief Nurse of Ireland. Another advisor, Dr. Michael Shannon, went on to be the National Director of Nursing Services, and the post initially held by Siobhan, and a strong recommendation from the Commission. We managed to get various things changed and brought up to date. The Commission was the big thing, and the change in nursing education was the main recommendation that came out of that really. Role clarity and nurse specialisation was also strong recommendations for nursing. They may be only titles, but they did sort out a lot and have lasted a long time really. Incidentally, both Siobhan and Michael went on to further develop and enhance much of the work that Peta had instigated, such as integrative nursing and leadership, both in Ireland and abroad. The changes in nurse education finally put nursing on a par with other such healthcare professionals, such as physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dietitians, and so on. Nurse specialisations, such as clinical nurse specialists and advanced nurse practitioners, provided a clear career pathway for nurses who wanted to remain in the clinical area. A steady increase in advanced nurse practitioner registration in recent years. In 2010, there were 33 registered ANPs, and at the end of 2017, the total number of registrations in Ireland was 253 of a variety of mixed specialities. And I know there are many more candidates going down the advanced nurse practitioner route, and they should graduate at the end of this year or next year. The Commission also recommended that the Department of Health devise and implement a research strategy and a database to facilitate Irish nursing and midwifery research, and Peta's idea for the most part was for that. The Commission also recommended that there should be a senior nurse at Health Board level. Health Board CEOs had refused this previously, but in 2006, a Director of Nursing Services Department was established within the Health Service Executive, and which both Siobhan and Michael managed and directed. So, integrative nursing. How and where does integrative nursing fit into this story? You may be asking yourselves. But I guess Peta, having worked with her and having shared much time with her over the last couple of years, she always has had the patient at the centre of all her decision making. And this story of Peta's life has given many examples of this, I believe, not just from a health perspective, but also from the well-being of both patients and staff. One of Peta's lifelong missions has always been to protect and promote the safety of childbirth. And this was evident not just in Ireland and Scotland during the years of practicing as a midwife, but also in Bethlehem. If you travel to Bethlehem, you will hear touching stories of the Irish matron who gave invaluable aid to local communities over 4 decades at the Holy Family Hospital in Bethlehem. This maternity hospital is just 800 metres away from the birthplace of Jesus. It is dedicated to providing care for women and infants without regard to religion or nationality. It gives expectant mothers and babies sanctuary and security in a region tormented by conflict. In addition to this, Peta Mary Taaffe, Dame Grand Cross of Honour and Devotion of the Order of Malta, and in conjunction with her order, funded a 4-year degree programme for midwifery in Bethlehem. Just a few reflections on a career in Irish nursing, looking back and looking forward. Peta's thoughts are varied, but she's very strong on seeing the need to get the best applicants into nursing and has always advocated for this. And we need to retain nurses in the profession. The theory practice of nursing education needs to be managed and balanced. The balance between the role of nurses and those of healthcare assistants need to be balanced, and nurses need to provide evidence-based care to patients. There's a lovely saying that some of my American colleagues there may be familiar with. Well-behaved women rarely make history. A saying by Eleanor Roosevelt. I don't know if Peta was well-behaved, to be honest, all of the time, but she certainly has made history. Peta practiced and promoted integrative nursing long before we knew exactly what integrative nursing was all about. Peta has indeed truly honoured a legacy that began with Florence Nightingale over 100 years ago, who stated that the role of the nurse was to put the patient in the best possible outcome and the best possible condition so that nature could act and healing occurs. Peta Taaffe, I believe, is our very special Irish Florence Nightingale. Thank you, Peta, sincerely, for all you have done for nursing in Ireland, and thank you everyone for listening to this story. We have a very unique opportunity for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, depending on my time, to hear the views of one of the pioneers of Irish nursing, as it is today, alongside those of the current Chief Nurse of Ireland, Dr. Siobhan O'Halloran. Siobhan has been in the role of Chief Nurse and Advisor to the Government since 2013. Siobhan has had a distinguished career spanning in excess of 30 years and has held many key positions in the Irish Health Service with the Department of Health, the Health Service Executive and Nursing Education sector, to include Nurse Advisor to the then Chief Nurse, Dr. Peta Taaffe, Executive Director, Health Reform, Department of Health, the National Director for Nursing Midwifery Services within the Health Service Executive, and Head of the School of Nursing at the Dublin Institute of Technology. So I'll join Peta and Siobhan, and we might just have a very informal little conversation here for the next 10 minutes. So thank you, Peta, and thank you, Siobhan, for popping up here. I hope everybody enjoyed listening to your story. I'm sure they did. So I'm just going to start off with a couple of questions, and I'm no Pat Kinney, or I'm no Marion Finucane, or anybody like that. But I just thought I'm going to ask Siobhan, having listened to the story of Peta's life and career, what do you think are the key lessons that we have learned from that over the last 30 years or so?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right. Geraldine, thank you for that, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think on behalf of everybody, all nurses in Ireland, I don't think Peta's life story has been captured before just like that. And as you can all see, it's quite an extraordinary story. It's easy for me to speak because, like Michael and Maureen here, who were in the office originally with Peta in the Department of Health, we're simply standing on the shoulders of a giant here. We learnt our trade from Peta, and she taught us well. I think you heard Geraldine say what we've come to call Peta-isms in the last couple of years. They were the one where you don't ask for permission, you ask for forgiveness. There's a couple of others Peta taught us and taught us very well. I see Michael and Maureen smiling. One of them is, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And I think what Peta meant by that was stop talking, get up and do it, just make it happen, if it's worth doing. There's several others that Peta would have taught us. And I think, Geraldine, where you talked there about the Commission on Nursing and the role that Peta played, the Commission on Nursing will forever, and not just in my lifetime or the lifetime of the next generation, I think it'll be forever the watershed of nursing in Ireland. And what it maps out was a new way of being in nursing. But that's like a philosophy. And we have loads of philosophers of change, but what we don't always have is skilled engineers of change. And it was Peta that made it happen at the centre of government. And without Peta, nursing would absolutely not be what it is in Ireland today. We wouldn't have a nursing degree, we wouldn't have advanced practice. It was somebody that kept going around the back of the scrum and just making things happen because she believed in nursing and she believed in what nursing in Ireland could become. She was never well behaved. She was always a lady, but never well behaved, and that's a compliment.
Do you have any comment to that, Peter? How do you think you behave?
Well, I think behaviour is dictated by the circumstances, and it's no good saying, oh well, who's going to cover me, or that's against the rules, you can't do it. If the situation warrants that you do it. And one of the other isms that I've always lived by is that rules are made for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise people. And I think that is a very true saying. I think I got that from reading the autobiography of a Second World War fighter pilot called Douglas Bader, if any of you have ever heard of him. He lost a leg, or both his legs, I think, and he still flew Spitfires. And that was one of his truisms that he lived by. So, but I have to say that Siobhan has worked tirelessly to bring nursing on, and I think it's now regarded in the Department of Health as a very, very important part of the department, whereas before it was, well, you know, I suppose we'll have to have them. But now I think she has really made it, made people realise how valuable it is. So thank you for that, Siobhan.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, I suppose it's not often that we have a current chief nurse and a past chief nurse, and we face a lot of challenges in nursing today also. Do you want to just share some of those, Siobhan, from your angle? What do you see are the current challenges facing nursing today?
Sure, I think some of them you pointed out, coming towards the end of your presentation there. I think one of the big challenges we have is the whole area of technology. Okay, it's going to change everything. Nursing is growing and growing and growing like that. And the number of people we have to provide nursing and do nursing is growing in the opposite direction. So we have to get better and we have to think in new ways of doing things. And I don't think the level of thinking that's taken us to where we are today is going to actually help us solve the problems of tomorrow. And on that, I think I draw on one of the things that Peta taught us. One of the first things Peta did when she went into the department was to bring in a gang of younger people. And I'm not saying we're old now, Maureen and Mike, but we were probably a fraction younger 20, 25 years ago. And she just let us loose. She cast the net very wide, and whatever we thought we might do, once we were doing what Peta thought was the right thing, she absolutely just let us run wild and capitalised on, you know, what younger people thought about nursing. And I think that will go a long way to help us solve problems into the future. The very, very first thing I did in the department was exactly what Peta taught us, was to recruit in the next generation to try and help solve the problems we're dealing with today.
Excellent. Okay, any last final words, Peter, before we go, or Siobhan?
Move it to Peta.
Perfect. Peter.
Well, I have to say I'm slightly embarrassed and rather nonplussed by all the things that Geraldine has said. I know I said them to her, but so I can't blame Geraldine. But I hope you found it interesting to some extent, and I think it's marvellous to see this whole room full of people from all these different countries, all intent on improving patient care by nursing and the whole way it's carried out, the way it's organised, the way it's integrated with other services, and it's certainly moving on enormously, and our friends in the United States definitely are moving it on very fast in the form of technology and so on, and I think in terms of patient care. So well done them, and I hope that, well, I'm sure that there'll be another meeting such as this in another 2 years somewhere else, and again people will learn from each other, which is so important, because it's no good sort of thinking that you're going to reinvent the wheel every time. What you want to do is to look at what other people have done and build on it, and I think that's what we're trying to do in this country.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Geraldine, Peta, and Siobhan. As a token of our appreciation, we'd like to present you with copies of the second edition of Integrative Nursing.